We've all been there, that burning in your chest, that primal urge to explain, to defend, to set the record straight. But here's the hard truth most people miss. The harder you try to prove your point, the more power you bleed away. When your words are twisted, when the truth becomes their ammunition, and your reaction becomes their entertainment. This is no longer a conversation. It's a psychological battlefield. And in this battle, the loudest person in the room is usually the first one to lose. But here's the twist. You don't need to fight back. You don't need to shout to be heard. You only need one ultimate weapon: silence. Because the moment you stop, that's when karma starts its work. You may fall silent, but the universe doesn't. Truth has a gravitational pull of its own, and it always finds its way back home. In this video, we're going to break down 7 situations where absolute silence isn't a sign of fear, but of immense strength. To protect your energy, to preserve your dignity, and to let the weight of their own actions crush them without you ever lifting a finger. Because remember, silence isn't the absence of words. It's the presence of control. Situation number 1. And perhaps it's the most familiar, the most painful. When someone lies about you. It feels like a dagger in the back, doesn't it? A false accusation, a fabricated story that spreads like wildfire. And what's our first human impulse? To fight the fire. We want to jump in, to scream, "That's not true." We want to present our evidence, call our witnesses, and fight for our reputation. But let's pause for a second and think like a strategist. The person spreading the lie isn't looking for the truth. If they wanted the truth, they wouldn't have lied in the first place. What they are looking for is your reaction. They want to see you panic. They want you to step onto their stage, under their spotlight, and perform the role of the desperate defendant. Every explanation you offer, every attempt to clarify, just makes you look more suspicious to the audience they've gathered. You're playing their game, by their rules, a game you can't win. The Stoics understood this psychological trap thousands of years ago. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius wrote a simple but powerful directive in his private journal. If it is not true, do not say it. If it is not right, do not do it. Period. No pleading, no explaining. Your integrity is the only statement you ever need to make. Imagine a man named James. At his job, a toxic rumor is started about him. The whispers in the hallways, the sideways glances. James's gut is screaming at him to send a company-wide email defending himself. But instead, he does something radical. Nothing. He shows up, stays calm, and lets his work speak for itself. Weeks go by. And then the inevitable happens. The lie, having no foundation, collapses under its own weight. The accuser is exposed. And James, because he never got down in the mud to wrestle, his dignity remains untouched, shining even brighter. So, what do you do? First, play the long game. A lie is a sprint. The truth is a marathon. Trust its endurance. Second, anchor yourself in your own truth. If you know who you are, why does their fiction matter? And third, let karma be your press secretary. People who weave webs of deceit eventually get tangled in them. Let them get caught in their own story. Your silence is your freedom. Silence is your... But what happens when that dagger isn't wielded by a stranger or a rival, but by someone you trusted with your life? The pain transforms. If a lie is a dagger, then betrayal is an earthquake. It doesn't just injure you, it shifts the very ground you stand on. It comes from the people you built your world around, a best friend, a partner, a family member. And when it hits, it feels like your chest is collapsing inward. Your first impulse? A confrontation. You want to look them in the eyes and scream the question, why? You want them to acknowledge it, to feel even a fraction of the pain they caused. We crave an explanation, we crave closure because our brains cannot compute this level of chaos. We need a reason for the world to make sense again. But here is the brutal truth you have to accept. People who betray you have already written a story in their head that makes it okay. They've constructed a version of reality where they aren't the villain. They don't see what they've done, or worse, they do, and they simply don't care. And here's the deadliest trap. The more you chase closure from them, the more you rip your own wound open. Do you know what they really want? Your reaction, your energy, your rage, your pain, your confusion. Because that proves they mattered. It validates that they had power over your emotional world. So what happens when you give them nothing? No screaming, no revenge, just silence. A heavy, deafening silence. That's when they realize it. They didn't just lose access to your words, they lost access to your soul. The Stoic philosopher Seneca once wrote, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." Betrayal is that friction. It stings, but it clarifies. It separates what's real from what was just convenient. It forces you to confront one hard truth. Not everyone you love is meant to stay. Think of the story of Sarah, a woman in a friendship that spanned over a decade. They shared everything. But one day, she discovered her best friend had betrayed her, exposed her secrets, undermined her success. For what? Jealousy? Insecurity? Ego? At first, Sarah wanted a fiery confrontation. But instead, she chose silence. No fight, no drama, just a quiet exit. And you know what happened? The friend waited for the explosion. She was ready for the chaos. But all she got was absence. And that silence, it haunted her. Because silence has weight. It echoes louder than any argument ever could. So when betrayal finds you, first, accept who they really are. Mourn the person you thought they were, but accept the person they've shown you they are. That old version no longer exists. Second, don't waste your breath on someone who chose to write your value in pencil. And finally, walk away without an explanation. Your silent exit is the final lesson. And it's a lesson they have to learn by themselves. At the end of the day, you are not the one who lost. They are. They lost access to someone loyal, real, and rare. Let your absence be the consequence they have to live with. But not all attacks are as profound as betrayal. Some are far more common, far cheaper, designed not to break your heart, but simply to get under your skin. This brings us to the daily battleground of the insult. Situation number 3, the insult. Let's be honest, insults are cheap. That's why the weak use them so often. Whether it's a sarcastic remark, a passive-aggressive jab, or a direct verbal punch. Their goal is never truth. Their goal is provocation. Picture it this way. The insulter is casting a fishing line. They don't care about the conversation. They only care if you bite. Your reaction is the bait. And the moment you take it, by getting angry, firing back, or even logically defending yourself, you're hooked. You've handed them exactly what they wanted. Control. It doesn't matter how clever your comeback is or how sharp your argument is. The second you engage, you've stepped into their arena, playing by their rules. And in their arena, you always lose. This isn't a new idea. The Stoics recognized thousands of years ago that dignity isn't up for debate. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, gave us the unbeatable strategy. The best revenge is to be unlike your enemy. Read that again. When someone insults you, they're sending you an invitation to abandon your calm, to throw away your dignity, and to get down in the mud with them. But a Stoic-minded person doesn't live in the mud. They don't flinch. They don't fire back. They simply observe. Think of David. He just earned a well-deserved promotion. At a company event, a jealous coworker in front of everyone takes a jab. Wow, I guess they're giving promotions to just anyone now. The room goes quiet. All eyes turn to David, waiting for the drama. But he doesn't argue. He doesn't defend. He looks the man in the eyes, offers a small, calm smile, and says, "Absolutely nothing. No comeback. No drama." And in that moment, David's silence strips the insulter of all his power. Nothing frustrates a bully more than being completely ignored. So how do you handle insults? First, recognize what they're fishing for. They don't want the truth. They want to disrupt your peace. Don't grant them that. Second, let your stillness speak. When your face doesn't flinch, when your tone stays calm, it sends a message louder than words. You don't control me. Third, hold your frame. Confidence doesn't argue. Self-respect doesn't explain. When you refuse to lower yourself, they have nothing to rise to. At the end of the day, you don't need to match their noise. You need to master your silence. Because real strength doesn't yell. It doesn't have to. But what if the person attacking you isn't yelling at all? What if instead they're crying? This leads us into a far more complex and infuriating game. The world of the manipulative victim. Situation number 4. And this one is one of the most infuriating. The manipulative victim. Have you ever been in a conversation where you're trying to logically solve a problem and then suddenly the script gets flipped? All at once you're the bad guy. You're the aggressor, the insensitive one, the one who just doesn't get it. Meanwhile, they, with watery eyes and a trembling voice, have become the poor, misunderstood soul. If this sounds familiar, you know this isn't a debate. This is a performance. And you've just been cast as the villain. Here's the trap that so many good people fall into. You try to use facts. You present evidence. You quote previous conversations. You try to pull them back to reality. But you're bringing a spreadsheet to an opera. You're speaking facts while they are playing emotions. And in the court of public opinion, whether it's just other co-workers listening in or mutual friends, emotion almost always wins over reason. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus warned about this. He said, "To complain is always non-productive and never appropriate." He understood that professional victims don't complain for solutions. They complain for sympathy. They are building a narrative. And when you step in to defend yourself, you're not clarifying the truth. You're just validating their performance and becoming a scene partner in their play. Think of Rachel. She had a coworker who, whenever held accountable, would immediately switch into victim mode. The tears, the deflection, the blame shifting. Rachel tried to stay calm. She brought emails, she cited timelines, and every single time it backfired. People looked at her like she was bullying someone who was already down. So she stopped. No more defense, no more counterpoints, just grounded, intentional silence. And over time, a funny thing happened. People started to see a pattern. They realized this person always had a sob story, always had a new enemy, and just like that, the act collapsed. So, how do you bring down the curtain on this performance? First, rule number 1, do not defend yourself. They aren't listening, they're acting, and the audience loves drama. Don't feed it. Second, emotionally detach. Be a scientist observing an experiment, not a part of it. Observe. Don't absorb the chaos they create. And third, trust in the power of repetition. People might believe them once, maybe twice, but patterns don't lie. Eventually the mask slips. At the end of the day, you don't owe clarity to someone who profits from confusion. Let them play their role. Let them run their script. Because sooner or later, every show comes to an end. And your silence? That's how you bring down the curtain on their performance. But while some attacks are loud and theatrical, perhaps the most painful form of disrespect is the one that happens in complete silence. It's not a loud insult or a dramatic betrayal. It's the slow, creeping poison of simply being ignored. This one isn't a loud insult. There's no dramatic betrayal. This is something worse. A slow disappearance. The greatest insult isn't what they say to you. It's what they no longer notice. You're the one who always shows up. You're the one who remembers the birthdays, who sends the just checking and text. You're the one pouring your attention, your time, and your energy out. And in return, you get indifference, an empty silence. And here's the bitter truth we all have to learn. The more you try to prove your worth, the more invisible you become. You turn up the volume, but they simply stop listening. Why? Because it's a fundamental law of human psychology. People don't value what's always available. They value what they're afraid to lose. When you're constantly there, constantly available, you don't become indispensable. You become part of the furniture. You become a utility, like electricity or running water. No one thinks about it until the tap runs dry. This is where Stoicism hands you your power back. The sage Seneca said, "Time discovers truth." But sometimes the truth they need to discover is your absence. Think of Jake. He was that consistent friend, that thoughtful colleague. But slowly he noticed a sad pattern. His phone only rang when he was the one making the call. No one asked about his day. He realized he wasn't being valued. He was being convenient. So he made a decision. No arguments, no speeches. He simply stopped. He stopped reaching out. And the result? It was like a truth serum. The ones who truly cared, the ones who genuinely valued him, noticed the shift. They reached out. The others? They just faded into the quiet. And that, right there, was the answer he needed. So, what do you do when your presence is taken for granted? First, stop chasing. If they can't see your value when you're present, let them feel it when you're gone. Second, let your absence speak. Don't announce your withdrawal, just withdraw. Your silence forces awareness. Third, observe who makes the effort. This isn't a malicious test. This is data collection. Data on who truly deserves your energy. At the end of the day, you don't prove your worth with effort. You prove it with distance, because those who deserve you will feel the silence, and those who don't were never meant to have you in the first place.